Hello, this is Vincent and Anna, and we're presenting our game for CS601B's Project 2. Our game was based around the game Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, which Vincent actually used to play. Essentially, the goal of the game is to collect a certain number of flowers within the number of levels given. We set our game so that the player had to collect 12 flowers in 5 levels. If you do collect all the flowers and reach the last level, you would win the game. If not, or you run out of health beforehand, you would lose the game. After collecting all the flowers on one floor, you can move on to the next floor through the staircase, which is a green icon. There are also monsters on each floor corresponding to the level you are on. The first floor has one monster, the second floor has two monsters, and so on. The monsters track the position of the player and move as they move accordingly. The player has a health bar, as seen on the bottom right, which goes down every time a monster is one space away from you. The player can also attack the monster and kill it, but at the cost of losing one life. So you have to be decisive in whether you want to keep running away from the monster or lose a life by attacking and killing it. Monsters can also get a hold of flowers. If this occurs, the player must attack the monster, in order to get the flower they are holding.
Manage to collect enough flowers, so if we come up short with like 10 or 11, that will result in a loss. And also enemies will be roaming the map, so when they do, it's actually possible to encounter enemies and not survive. And when you die and your health reaches 0, that is also a loss condition. For us, we define our 3 creative mechanics to be very related to the enemies that we've included. So the first one would be that the enemies actually increase as the floor number increases. So let's say on floor 3, you'd have 3 enemies. On floor 5, you had 5 enemies. And we've actually implemented a case where you can actually have a hard mode where the enemies implemented, there will be 10 enemies on the 10th floor. So this makes the game actually progressively challenging, especially trying to survive on like the higher floors, as there's a lot of enemy movement and there's a lot of them coming at you. So sometimes when they come at you in a row, you'd have to think about whether you want to run away or sacrifice a bit of health in fighting them. Our second creative mechanic was that enemies can actually pick up the flowers themselves too. So in the original Pokemon game, a lot of the enemies would be carrying the items that you need to retrieve for your clients, and we've implemented that here so that enemies can actually pick up flowers themselves and carry them around with them. And if let's say you're running up short, you have 11 flowers, it's the 5th floor. The final enemy picks up the flower. You'd have to approach that enemy and take initiative and basically kill him so that you could retrieve the flower back. And our final, third, and last mechanic was that enemies actually have 2 life hearts before dying. So we weren't able to implement animation for this, but basically when a player attacks an enemy, the enemy also loses health, and an enemy's health bar is 2 hearts, while the player's health bar is 10. This shows that you need to actually hit the enemy twice for the enemy to die. Now, what this implies is that you can't actually fight all the enemies in the game because you as a player only have 10 hearts, and approaching an enemy and hitting an enemy in the first place actually takes away 1 heart already from you in engaging in that combat. So each encounter with an enemy will take at least 1 heart from you, and you wouldn't be able to fight all the enemies because there would be 1 for the first floor, 2 for the second floor, plus 3, plus 4, plus 5, and that'd be 15 enemies total in the game. So when you fight these 15 enemies, as a player, you would have to lose 15 hearts. You would have to have 15 hearts to fight all of them, and you don't have that. So this makes the game very strategic in that you have to choose your fights wisely. Do you fight only the enemies that pick up flowers, only the enemies that are in your way? And you can use the maze too to your advantage, using the maze to trick enemies basically and going around the walls. Because another kind of creative mechanic that we've implemented is the basically tracking function that enemy has on players. Enemies can basically follow players around, but they only follow players if there's no wall. If there's a wall there, they get stuck. So you can use the walls of a maze to your advantage to circle around enemies and try to avoid combat.